Hey, it's Tate. How do Chinese international students choose where to study, and what kind of problems do they face? I recently interviewed a handful of Chinese students who are studying abroad. I wanted to learn about their study abroad journey, their initial plan, the application process, and how their studies began. In this video, I'll briefly share three of their stories with you. Each story is a little bit different. I'll spend 1 or 2 minutes on each one, then I'll sum it up and sprinkle in some insights from our experience marketing a bunch of different schools. I hope it's useful for marketers or admission staff that are considering how to reach Chinese students and what to say. I'll keep the students and schools anonymous as they requested. So for the first student, let's call her the pro. She was the most independent. She knew what she wanted and didn't need help from education agents to get it. This student wanted to emigrate to Canada, probably, and live there permanently, probably. She loves new challenges and wanted a different life and a career change too. She already had a degree, but wanted to get a new degree in a new field. Her major is something very specific and career oriented. Once she gets the degree, she'll have a very high chance of securing a job, regardless of whether she stays in Canada or goes back to China. Before looking at schools, she researched the various provinces of Canada. She liked the look of 3 of them in particular, so she narrowed her search down to schools in just those provinces. After that, she researched several different schools in those provinces. She did her online research on Baidu, Google, and YouTube mainly, but also other places. She'd seek out Chinese information first and then resort to English when she couldn't find Chinese. During her research, she made notes and kept things very organized. She applied to several schools directly and was accepted by most of them. Then she did the visa application herself too by following the advice of a YouTuber. She said it'd be a waste of time and money to use agents because they cost money and probably can't do anything special for her anyways. This is a very independent student who reminds me of myself nowadays, whereas this next student that I'm going to talk about reminds me of myself when I was younger. The second student, let's call her the adventurer. And like I said, she reminds me of myself when I went to study abroad in China. She's only about 20 years old now and is studying at a European university. To her, the cultural side of studying abroad is very valuable. She makes friends, especially with foreigners, and enjoys being away from her parents. She's working towards an undergrad degree, but doesn't have a crystal clear direction for the future yet. She didn't have a straight path to study in Europe at all. Like many students that went to study abroad recently, the pandemic has had a big impact on her. In fact, she has even changed her major already. This is how she got there. First, she moved to another city in China, far away from her parents, where she started her studies. It was here that she started to look for options to study abroad. She found some options via her school and then decided to dig in more through her own research. She described the process to me in detail. She said she went to Zhihu first. Zhihu is a Q&A platform. There she searched for the school's name and read everything she could find about it. She wanted a broad perspective, so she considered information from official sources, but also from students and from a teacher. Then she went on Baidu and found the official Chinese website, read it, and moved on to the official English website. Next, she did a WeChat search where she found the official school account to read and follow. She also came across content on Bilibili and YouTube too. This part of her process is a textbook description of how we expect students to behave. She gobbled up content from multiple Chinese platforms and sources. To apply, she went through her school. There's a teacher she could talk to that is also like an agent, I guess. I asked her why she applied that way instead of applying directly, and she said it just seemed like the thing to do. The third student that I'm going to mention today, let's call them the high school boarder. This student started his study abroad experience in high school. Now, as a parent, when I hear of teenagers moving away to a country to study on their own, it makes me imagine how much I'd miss my kids if they did the same. It sounds kind of hard to me, actually. Anyways, he was already abroad when he started planning for university. His English level was really good too, so his search habits showed a combination of Chinese and Western styles. He'd been abroad so long that he wasn't even up to date on all the Chinese social platforms out there now. This is how his school search process went. First, he found schools close to where he lived in the US. He already had some friends there and generally liked the area. He also knew which major he wanted to get into already. Then he compared the rankings of potential schools, filtering out some that just weren't quite good enough, but also not being too picky about it, really. And like virtually every Chinese person I've ever talked to, he was also somewhat suspicious of the motivations of others. He said, I know some of those rankings are fake. Schools just pay for good rankings, but I still consider the rankings anyways. He also received some advice from a college placement officer in his school. And then when it was time to apply, he applied to 10 different schools, some through a common application system and some directly, but with the help of an agent. Okay, so what can we learn from these students? The marketing lessons. Each student is different. There's no exact set of steps they take in the research phase. There are some student personas that we can use. In marketing, we use the term personas to describe the imaginary people we target with our marketing efforts. When creating content, we imagine that those personas are engaging with the content. The first student was very independent and makes a good persona for graduate students. She's a pro. The second student makes a good persona for undergraduate students. Her process was more chaotic. The third student is often forgotten by marketers in my niche. He has lots of experience studying abroad, so he's not quite like a local student, but also not a student traveling from China or out of China for the first time. Next, let's talk about countries, programs, and schools. Students will approach selection from a few main angles. Which country or region should they go to? Which program, major, degree do they want? And which school do they want to go to? When creating marketing content for these students, we have to keep these all in mind. I feel like the school and program part is more obvious, but we also need to create content for them about the city and the country that they'll go to, the culture there, the life, because it's a big decision for them to move over there. We want to make them comfortable and make them look forward to it. Next, education agents are optional but helpful. So some students will use education agents and some don't. So our marketing that we do to reach students needs to help them process the application on their own if possible. But all the Chinese content we create for schools is also useful for the agents too. If an agent has loads of high quality Chinese content about your school and none about a competitor, it makes it much easier for them to sell your school to the students. That being said, it's definitely possible to attract students with no agents at all. In fact, we even have a client that does not allow applications via agents whatsoever. I predict that the weaker agents will be out of the business in 5 to 10 years, and the agents that remain will be the ones who can provide the best value to students as opposed to simply helping them process applications and process visas even. Next, the last tip I have about marketing for today is to use Chinese language content on Chinese language platforms. Students use Chinese language platforms first and English second. They also tend to do very thorough research, trying to triangulate the information they receive from multiple different sources. If they sense something is fishy, they get apprehensive. Examples would be if they're getting an overly rosy picture from the official content on the school's website, or maybe the same thing from an education agent. For example, when we are talking to potential students on social media, they'll often come to us and they'll say, oh, the agent said this and this and that. Is that true? And then we'll tell them if it's true or not. The same student might look online for reviews from alumni or other students that are there already and try to figure out if what they're hearing is legit or not. The key platforms are the official websites for English and Chinese, Baidu, the search engine, Zhihu, the Q&A platform, WeChat, the massive Chinese social network that's kind of unlike anything else in the rest of the world. Then also the other supporting platforms are Weibo, which is a microblog, kind of like Twitter or Facebook, Xiaohongshu, which is also quite unique, but a little bit like Pinterest with a lot of shopping to it, or Instagram maybe, or all those things combined. Also Bilibili, which is like YouTube, and Douyin, which is actually TikTok. And then finally, Chinese students will use Google and they'll use YouTube too sometimes. I teach a lot more about those platforms and how to use them on this YouTube channel and our China Digital Marketing 101 guide. You can check those out. If you like this kind of content, give us a like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you later.